A lot of people have asked me in the past, how am I able to play so many characters at the consistent level I do? I made a Twitter post to see if people were still interested, and it gained a decent bit of traction. So I decided to go ahead and follow through because usually I procrastinate a lot. But before I actually get into everything, one thing I would like to point out is really difficult to improve in a fighting game without putting yourself against other strong players, and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is a major step to improving because it's pretty much what I did as a competitive player and for somebody that's really good at using like a high pool of characters. If it wasn't for me like just getting out there and entering tournaments, I would have never met Zerom, which he is pretty much one of the big reasons why I am as good as I am in this game currently. Because outside of playing him a lot during the beginning of the game, he's pretty much the main reason as to why I play so many characters, and pretty much the mindset that I have when it comes to playing the game competitively and also labbing it. When it comes to picking up a new character, rather it's one that's already released or a DLC character, the very first thing that I like to do is lab out the character's buttons, or depending on if that character has a really unique kit like Wilderness for example, I would lab out their special moves and then I would get to their buttons a little bit later, because if a character that's like a big body has slow movement speed, and for example Wilderness has a step dash, so his movement is completely different than any other character, so I would test the ways that he can kind of maneuver around like certain characters first before I like get into anything. But for Sandalphon, the very first thing that I did when I picked him up, like on DLC release that very night, I labbed out his buttons. So I labbed out Far 5H, his 2M, his Far 5M, light, and all of that. And I wrote down pretty much like all of his frame data, since there was no dust loop because he just came out fresh. And sometimes, depending on like how I would feel, because not everybody has like a good memory and not everybody's like always aware and whatnot, I basically went through like the notes of the character's frame data and I memorized it before I got in an actual match. Now, the best way to actually understand like how to use a character beforehand, so for say if you understand that your character has a 2M that's 7 frames, or just a good counter poke that's like 7 to 8 frames. So usually if a character is doing like spaced out 6XL pressure like this, what you can do, if you have a 7 frame button, you can 2M to actually stop them from doing another 6XL and just forcing like +2 in your face, which is really good considering that Sandalphon has a -3 on block 2M that's also 7 frames. So that means that like his 2M is a really good counter poke, and that also means that since his 2M is also -3 on block, for say if he throws it out from this distance, since it's a really far button, he can also box out the opponent. So for say if I do 6XL to 2M against Grand with this distance, which is why I also say like learning matchups is imperative, because depending on the character, that block string may not work, but characters like Grand is really effective against, because Grand doesn't have like any legitimate counter pokes outside of 5U, but nobody's gonna do 5U. That is like a surefire way to get killed. But outside of that, he has no like adequate buttons to actually counter poke Sandalphon. Like I literally tried right there and I just stuffed myself. Like like it's way too much RPS like post max range 2M situation. And if he's fighting a character like Beelzebub, since Beelzebub doesn't really have like good counter poke options, nor does Lance, Lance would have to either take the next block string sequence and hope to fuzzy mash to beat Sandalphon in the next interaction, which isn't really that good since Sandalphon has like decent walk speed and decent run speed. He He can, you know, shimmy Lance a lot if you were to try to like fuzzy mash or anything. So that's like one thing that Sandalphon was good at that I noticed before I like actually took him into actual matches. Another thing is his Far 5H. So for say if you don't want to do like you know 2M into 6XL, you can also substitute that with Far H because it's also good for boxing out the opponent. And if the opponent is under 50% meter, you can incorporate 236M, which if 236M is presented, since it's slow, if they roll it, you'll be safe on block. But most of the time, since people are going to be under mental stack, because I mean you can also present like, you know, the heavy version, not everybody's going to be aware. That is like a surefire way to like actually like push in on offense a lot more consistently. It's like a tool that I like to use for conditioning. Other Sandalphons like to use it as well, which I mean it's just good all around, but it still has a weakness of you can roll it and then directly after you rolling it, Sandalphon will be put in a position where he is negative. So post roll, see if I can like actually set this up. Sandalphon can actually get punished. So a good workaround when it comes to this, for say if your opponent actually knows, but you know, speaking on if the case when a DLC character actually first releases, like nobody's gonna know that, so they're gonna get hit by it. But for say if somebody labs Sandalphon and there was a competent player out there during that time period where they were like, oh my god, I know how to filter this, what you can do, you can throw out light fireball, which after, you know, being at max distance, once you throw light fireball, the only thing that they can do realistically right here is nothing. Like you actually can't do anything about this outside of spot dodging, which if you spot dodge, you're still in a bad position because let me see, I can like set this up. Sandalphon will be positive 2 if you roll, which he can still like hit you directly after and continue his offense unless you just roll into DP, but that's like a huge risk in itself. If you spot dodge directly after that, Sandalphon has the opportunity of, you know, doing run up 6XL. So that entire like RPS around that is like really effective to know. And especially if you're labbing like a new character, like for say if another basic Shoto comes out, then that is like one thing to lab, like how the fireball works, like the weaknesses of the fireball, so you know how to like actually structure your offense. Because doing things like, let me set this up. So doing things like this, then directly shooting out like EX fireball or just doing 6XL directly after to continue your block string sequence, or like even micro walking up into doing like 2M into 6XL, like understanding your character's like strengths is really good for like first impressions of the character, and also like running your character like against other players, especially when like the character just dropped. Another thing that I also lab, which was his lariat, it being -4, is a really huge thing, because even though he's safe directly afterwards, like for say if I like throw out lariat, let's see, say if I like throw out lariat directly after, the opponent cannot block. Let me get like the Sandalphon bot. Okay, yeah, so if I set the bot to do lariat and I try attacking him directly after, I cannot punish him, because being -4 means that you are safe directly after throwing that after throwing that special move, or even if it is a normal, if it's -4, it's also safe. Like Willness's overhead, for example. If Willness spaces out his overhead, you'll also be safe. But for say if that lariat had no pushback, then even though you're -4 in that situation, you can be thrown. But since the lariat has pushback, you don't have to worry about that. you can just DP directly after that, because if your opponent attacks you directly after throwing out that -4 lariat, that means that within that time frame you can do a DP if you're aware and you're alert and you're reacting to them doing like R5L or 2M, literally anything. You can just DP it directly after it. That is like a really important part of Sandalphon's kit, because he is really good at RPSing around that since he has a meterless reversal. But excluding that, if you have a -4 on block like move, like Wellness this overhead, once it's like presented and it's not spaced out, he can actually be grabbed. If I can like actually, there we go. And it's like no escape punish, like you can't do anything about that. But luckily for Sandalphon, he is always spaced out and he actually cannot be grabbed directly after his lariat comes out. So yeah, grab always whiff, like always. That's for light lariat. Now as for medium lariat, he's -6, so once you throw this move out, you're essentially going to have to commit with his unique follow-up, which is his Zohar strike, where he'll be +3 after having an element casted on him, whether it's like fire, earth, water, wind. You pretty much get the gist. Like that's just like free plus frames. So if you're trying to skip neutral with this character, from the very first time like I labbed him, I was like, to actually see and understand like this character's strengths, I was like, okay, so his lariat is either -4 or -6, because his heavy lariat is also -6 as well. So since it has a 14 frame startup, I can use this as like a jump scare move to skip neutral or whiff punish people. Another good thing about Sandalphon's lariat is it also catches people that are trying to dash in versus him. So once you understand the distance of Sandalphon's lariat, you can stop people from just like, you know, willy-nilly trying to like run up to you. So for say, if I'm the opponent and I'm fighting against Sandalphon and whatnot, and I see them like dashing up versus me, I can use 214H to stop it. And since 214H has like its heavy follow-up, for say if they do end up like just, you know, micro dash into block, then I can use my unique follow-up and then boom, I got like free plus frames from that. The thing that's really good about it is, since you can't dash block in this game, once you throw out lariat, the opponent has to commit to like, you know, reactionary SBA, DP, or spot dodge, which nobody, I don't really care what you are, you're not really gonna like spot dodge like 214H like at all. And it's also the same thing with Versuzia. When Versuzia came out, like the very first thing that I did on how I got like 10k crystals so fast on that character when she first dropped was abusing her lariat, and also the fact that, you know, obviously she had like really strong combos and really amazing normals, but that's aside from the point. Having a jump scare lariat that delivers immediate plus frames is really good on like any character. It doesn't matter what that character is. If a character has that, that's pretty good. And once I understood that Sandalphon had that, I was like, this character is a really strong neutral based Shoto character. And because of that, I was able to understand how to utilize this character. The problem is, when it comes to dealing with neutral based characters, you kind of have to understand how each and every matchup works, which I'll talk about that in like, I guess another video, or maybe later on in the video, I don't know. It's to be decided. But every time when a new character drops or you're trying to pick up a character, the very first things you should do is lab out the character's normals, lab out the frame data, and understand how their kit works. And that is the best way to pretty much like just go about like learning any character. I can't really like simplify it further, but The only difference is, as I said before, it all comes down to experience and everything along that line. Putting yourself out there, getting that exposure so you can actually improve with that character is the main important part.
Okay. So you picked up your character and you probably played them for a few hours or a day or so, and you want to see how stronger players or top level players are using that character. When I look at replays of how top level players or stronger players use a character I just picked up or recently picked up, I tend to look at how they're using their tools mainly in matchups. So when you pick up your character, you already studied their tools, you know their ranges, you have an idea of how their normals work, but putting them together is what makes the fight you're gonna play in. And so watching how top players use their tools could really change your perspective about the character and really help you also play other characters into a matchup. For example, Cagliostro versus Fairy tends to not be very Cagliostro favored because of how Fairy can keep her out and make her pretty limited on the tools she can use. But for example, if you look at how some top players are using Cagliostro, they tend to use her jumping ult trap in a different way than it was designed to be used. Mostly it was designed to be used as a area denial tool, but since this is a zoner versus character that wants to be in on the other character matchup, you could see stronger players and top players are tending to spend their meter on using the ult trap instead of an area of denial to be used right on top of Fairy. So they can force Fairy in a situation where she would have to spot dodge or she would have to block the ult trap, and in that time frame it gives Cagliostro enough time to get in and skip the neutral game and run her offense and stay in front of Fairy's face so she can win the match. This can be applied to many other characters. You can see how strong players are using their tools versus matchups you two are probably struggling in, or how they fight the entire cast. It's really important to take note of the decision making other players are using to fight the entire cast of the game you're playing. So then you can also transition that knowledge to other games you're playing and other characters you might also pick up. For example, like if you can use Cagliostro's ultimate spear to whiff punish players for doing setups or missing a button or a special move from a part of the screen that Cagliostro can't really reach, then you can apply that same knowledge to specials such as Versusius Pillar, or even, for example, Catalina Ult Fireball. And another thing I look for when watching other players' replays is how they also structure their offense with the character, or how they're going about neutral with the character, and also how they're using their tools in general for those. For example, how they're putting all their normals together while they have their opponent on defense, or how are they using their tools to keep their opponent at bay and neutral. For example, like Kag using her traps to keep Grimnir out of the air instead of on the ground to keep him in the air, trying to look for a punish attempt at him using his seal dashes instead of trying to punish him yourself, getting him to fly in the air more. It is shown that it's better from top players and stronger players of Cagliostro using the air traps instead of the ground traps to deny the area completely to have a better fighting chance against Grimnir. I also look at what spaces these players are playing the characters at, and what decisions they're making at these spaces, and are they choosing to go in, and when are they choosing to go in, and when are they choosing to back off to, instead of try to win with their character, how are they using the character to let the opponent make mistakes, or let the opponent try to overextend instead of trying to push their advantage. They're giving their I'm trying to see if they're giving their opponents a false sense of security, or if they're trying to suffocate them with the offense of their character. So I really try to see if a character is more stronger being suffocating on offense, or if they're more of a control type of character that doesn't mind resetting neutral and doesn't mind trying to earn that advantage back.
This is pretty much the end of the video. I plan on making a part 2 with Koji Coco sometime soon, whenever he's like actually available. If there's anything that needs to be improved upon in a video, like if something wasn't elaborated on enough, I'll be able to do that in the comment section. And I also do plan on making like guides and whatnot in the future. But since this is my first time like actually creating a video and editing, feedback is much appreciated. And if you guys can like show support through like subscribing and liking, that's also like pretty nice. But outside of that, thank everybody for watching.